Good morning, Leadership University. Once again, it's Coach Lassiter coming to you for our second video session, the third session. We weren't able to do the live session this week, and it's really because I took the feedback that you guys gave me on that first week when I gave you those 3x5 cards in regards to activities, and I'm going to incorporate paintball training into the entire course or the entire curriculum next week. So on November the 26th, we'll actually have our leadership training that'll be woven into the paintball sessions, and I'll have to talk more about that at the end. But today I want to talk about attitude. We're going to go over a book called The Difference Maker Attitude by John Maxwell, a great leadership author. And the first thing I want to say is, people ask me all the time in regards to how do I see myself, and I will tell you that I see myself as a motivational teacher, not a motivational speaker. See, a motivational speaker basically talks, and when they get through at the end, you feel a little bit better about yourself, but then the next day you don't really have anything to grasp onto. So from a motivational teacher standpoint, the intent should still be to have that same high energy impact the day of, but you should also equip the participants or the students or the team members. You should equip them with something so that going forward they can apply what they've learned to their life and allow them to get better, to improve. So let me go ahead and dig right in. The first thing we're going to talk about attitude is, where does your attitude come from? Have you ever heard that attitude is everything? I'll be the first one to tell you that attitude without talent won't work. I mean, you think about it on the baseball field. If you look at a player, they can have a great attitude, but if they can't play the game of baseball, it simply won't materialize for them. If somebody goes to catch and they absolutely cannot catch a baseball, then it's probably the wrong sport, and it's regardless of their attitude. Now, we're going to talk about how attitude can really impact and influence you, but you cannot if you don't have that. And I want you to think about a show such as American Idol. When somebody comes on there, they can have the best attitude in the world. If they can't sing, it's not going to matter. It's not going to be able to propel them to victory if they can't sing, even if they come on with the right attitude, and when the judges start telling them that they can't sing and their vocal cords are terrible, etc., they can look back at the judges and say, well, I believe I can sing. That's just your opinion. Well, you can say that, but it doesn't mean you can sing. So the real question that you have to ask yourself right now is, it is a difference maker, but is your attitude positive or negative? And then what is attitude? The next question I would have for you is, what is attitude? It's not just your inward feelings. It's not just your outward behavior. When you look at it, the roots of your attitude are inward, when your thoughts and emotions, and then the external part would be the fruit, your words and your actions. Those are external. So you can look at it as an outward look based on past experiences. And I will be the first to tell you, your attitude can either be your best friend or it can be your worst enemy. We can sit here and discuss particular players or scenarios all day long where a player that really has some skill sets themselves up for failure just because of their negative attitude. The next question is, where does your attitude come from? The first thing I would say is part of it's just your personality, your DNA, your natural wiring, the way that you are. For instance, my wife tells me that I get up in the morning and I will get out of bed with a positive attitude. It is 6:30 in the morning right now. I've just driven about a half hour from home to work, and I will tell you that I do. I really believe, I have a positive outlook on things, and that's just part of who I am. And really, when I have a bad day, it's very seldom that you'll have or see me in that kind of, having a bad day. So most people, if I'm having a bad day, they'll walk up and say, man, what's wrong? Coach Lassiter or Brian, Colonel Lassiter, what's going on? Because I'm typically a very positive oriented individual. And then association with your peers, who you hang out with. This is why your parents quite often are very concerned, depending on who you're hanging out with, because they realize that your attitude can be a direct reflection of who you're hanging out with. Next would be your environment. So you take those two, who you hang out with and where you're at. Quite often I'm positive either your coaches, your parents, role models at church and at different places in your life will look at you and say people and environments can either posture you for success or failure. The next would be expressions from others. What other people say to you. For instance, I will be the first to tell you that I've had interaction with coaches that I did not agree with the way that they spoke to their players. My son played for a coach that was completely negative, that only used terrible language. And I went to him one day and I said, Coach, I'll be honest with you. If I can lead men and women on the battlefield and not use that kind of language, then I'm positive you can pick a different vocabulary to lead, guide, and direct these young men on the baseball field. So, and he, at first he didn't take it the right way. But in all honesty, he came back and started to see it and came back later and actually thanked me. Your self-image, how you see yourself. Quite often that does affect whether you have a positive attitude or a negative attitude just because of your own abilities and how you see yourself. What about your exposure to growth? Your experiences. It's easy for me to sit here now and talk about leadership, in all honesty, guys, because in 28 years of it being in the military, I've been put in a multitude of leadership roles. I've been done, that's happened over a course of my career in different scenarios, whether it be combat, whether it be peacekeeping missions, whether it be, host nation partner capacity building, and just a variety of scenarios. And because of all that experience, it's enabled me to realize that from a leadership standpoint, I know what it takes in order to be successful now, regardless of the dynamics of the group, the location, or the actual problem sets that surround us. Your beliefs, what you think, your customs, your courtesies, traditions, things about you, things about your family, those things really matter when it comes to your attitude. Quite often when I see my wife who teaches third grade, when I'll go see her at her classroom and I'll see the young students that are saying things in the way they act, and you can look and say, they're obviously picking up that thought process, that attitude, that entire, posture, that's obviously coming from home. And then finally, choices. What the choices that you make can directly impact and influence your attitude. Next, let me talk about what your attitude cannot do for you. Once again, what it cannot do for you. Your attitude cannot disconnect you from reality. As I mentioned earlier, if you can't sing, a good attitude won't make you a better singer. If you can't run the 60-yard dash in 7 seconds, it's not going to make you a better sprinter. Your attitude cannot be a substitute for competence. For instance, you can stand there on the top of the Empire State Building and say you can fly. That would be attitude. Competence would be whether or not you can actually fly. So when you jump off, the better attitude doesn't mean you can fly. And your attitude can't substitute experience. As I just mentioned with all of my experience, the reality is this. We're putting you guys through this leadership course to help you understand how leadership in its totality can affect you and can really help posture you for success. But the truth is, at your age, you may not have had an opportunity to be a leader. Some of you have had the opportunity for coaches to come up and ask you to lead your team, to be the captain. Well, that's some of you, that's your first and maybe only opportunity that you've actually had the opportunity to lead others, especially when you start talking about leading peers. It's one thing if you're 17 or 16 and you're actually leading 10-year-olds or 11-year-olds, you consider those to be younger players and you can somewhat mentor them, but it's a complete different aspect when you're asked to lead your peers, your fellow players on your team. Your attitude cannot change the fact. The reality is if you're a pitcher and you throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, it can't change and make you a 95-mile-an-hour fastball guy. So it is what it is. It can't change those facts. Your attitude, let's talk about what your attitude can do for you. So talk about things it can do for you. Your attitude can make a difference in your approach in life. The thought process that the glass is half full. I have always been a glass half full kind of guy. I've always believed in looking at it from the positive perspective. When things happen, I've always kind of had that approach because I truly believe when you look at it that way, that it helps you truly decide or solve for yes. Instead of, oh, I can't do that, oh, woe is me, we're not going to be able to accomplish this. I've always had the impression that if you look at it from the other vantage point, if you happen to have a particular bad view, move. Move yourself so that you can see that it is a positive scenario, an opportunity. It can make a difference with relationships. You know, this book talks about the fact that when you focus on people skills, there's 4 principles. There's the lens principle, which says who we are determines how we see others. So once again, who you are, how you see yourself, that self-image, the things we already talked about, helps how you see. So that lens, how you see other people. The pain principle. Hurting people hurt other people. You know, you've probably heard, you know, misery loves misery. Your parents may have said that, or you may have heard somebody say that. What they're meaning and what they're saying is that, you know, when you find somebody that's all miserable and life is, oh, woe is me, well, then a lot of times those people like to drag other people down with them. It can't just be me that's having a bad day. I need to have 3 or 4 people around me having a bad day so that they try to have that same effect on other people. And then there's the elevator principle, which says you can either lift people up or you can take people down. Which one are you going to be? And then the learning principle, and I like this approach, is where each person believes when you meet someone else, they have the potential to teach you. You know, I talked our first live session, I talked about unity versus equality and how equality says everybody needs to be equal. Reality is everybody's not equal. When you take on that unity perspective and you start looking at it from the standpoint of everybody that comes to the team brings something different, and their skill sets are truly needed in order to make us a better team, a better organization. Well, that's the learning principle. And when they bring something, then you look out and you say, you know, I really like what he or she's doing. I want to see if I can emulate that. I want to see if I can get them to help me to understand how they have that particular skill set and how I can possibly, you know, build on that myself. And then the next concept I want to talk about is how to make your attitude your greatest asset. Take responsibility for your attitude. You got to realize, number one, as I've already mentioned, the different aspects, it's created by you alone. You create your attitude. Evaluate your attitude. You know, we talked about the after-action review in regards to when things happen, you know, sitting down and doing an actual assessment. Do that with your attitude. Sit down and look and ask somebody. I mean, just be honest and have somebody that you value, whether it's your parent or peer, say, you know, do you think my attitude works? Do you think my attitude is working against me or working for me? You know, because I'm telling you right now, young men, that when you start looking at this from a standpoint of I potentially want to play baseball or I want to do anything at a higher level, I want to be viewed as a professional. I want other people to, you know, look for me to be a potential hire or selection. I promise you, attitude will be a huge factor in whether or not they want to bring you to their team. Develop a desire to change. You know, desire to change. So if you do that assessment and somebody says, well, in all honesty, I think you really need to, you know, consider how you go on tirades or how you react the first, you know, opportunity or the first negative thing that happens to you. I want you to step back and evaluate why you're doing the way you're doing things. And I do the same thing as a coach. You know, I'm a very intense and bold coach. For those of you that have played for me, you realize that. But I will also be the first to admit I step back sometimes and I'll ask people around me, hey, where do I need to be? My wife, who keeps the book inside the dugout, is the first person to look at me and say, Coach, and that's all she'll say. And I know when she says that, it's not that she's saying I'm wrong in what I'm saying. It's either I'm wrong in how I'm saying it or the attitude that I have, because she realizes in order for me to be a positive influence and impact on the players, that my attitude as a coach is truly going to reflect in how the players are handling the current situation. And I will tell you, there's some of you may have heard this in a church sermon, and I will tell you it's true. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions. Your actions determine your habits. Your habits will identify your character, and then your character will determine your destiny. So when you really talk about changing yourself, you have to change the thought process. You know, and that deals with, you know, the inward attitude. So if it starts with the thought process, then it can transcend into how your destiny is actually going to be carried out. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, and then destiny. Then the big five attitude obstacles. Number one is discouragement. You know, John Maxwell in this book talks about how 95% of the people that fail aren't defeated, they just quit. So how you view what's happening to you, how you view your ability to be able to either overcome the hurdle and obstacle, how you view your whole approach quite often can be either the wall that you build or the catapult that you step on to jump over that obstacle or hurdle. So you just, it's all in your perspective. Change. People resist change due to the fact that it's unknown. However, I will tell you right now, only change can bring improvement. If you are continuing to train or to do things the same way, you will improve. Nobody says you won't improve, but if you take, for instance, let's take your swing. If there's a flaw in what you're doing, when you go back and you review it, say you video your swing, and you look at the things that you're doing, and if there truly is a hole or a flaw in your approach at bat, I'll be the first one to tell you the only thing that will improve that is your ability to change that aspect. You can talk all day long about, well, I'm going to get better in all the other areas. For instance, you have a hard time hitting a breaking pitch, an off-speed pitch. You just can't seem to stay balanced and drive the ball. Unless you make some changes, then I will tell you that's probably not going to change. Problems. Everyone has problems. What you need to realize is it's your perspective when you determine your level of success. So how you identify a problem. Do you see a problem as a wall, or do you look at a problem as an opportunity for you to be able to excel, for you to be able to succeed? Because typically how somebody views problems helps you to understand where they are attitude-wise. Most people have a good attitude when they're winning, when things are going fine, but true character and someone's attitude really reveals itself when they're faced with a problem or a scenario that they might not know what to do. They might not have the answer. The experiences, the things that we've talked about at this point, they don't have all that information, so they really find themselves at a loss for not just words, but a loss for which direction to go. And quite often, that can materialize in a negative attitude. The fear. Talks about lack of experience turns to ignorance, and ignorance becomes fear. I will tell you right now, fear, as I've talked about, the last time we had the live session, I talked a little bit about fear in regards to being in combat. Guys, I will be the first to tell you that fear is a reality. It's going to happen to anybody, regardless if you're in combat, maybe you're afraid because you got a test this week that you haven't prepared for, and you know where your grade's at, and you know what's going to happen if you don't pick your grade up. Your parents are, talking to you in regards to your grade point average or a particular class, etc. Well, that's fear, the same thing. So you just got to realize your attitude really can feed off of that. And then failure. I will tell you right now, the adage or the old saying of it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle what happens to you that really matters. I've always believed in failing forward, meaning it's one thing to fail. It's another thing to fail and not learn from that experience or opportunity. You're going to find in life you're going to have failure. There's no such thing as somebody that just always wins. The reality, and if somebody tells you that, they're probably lying. So I will tell you right now that you're going to have failure. You're going to have setbacks. Your ability to be able to learn from that, to be able to assess it, to analyze it, and then to move forward simply means failing forward. So when you come right back in that same scenario, you have that opportunity with the game on the line in the last inning with the tying or winning run on third, and you come up to bat. You don't always succeed, but those experiences hopefully lend you to a opportunity to be able to learn from it. So when you get back in that exact same scenario, you can win the next time. You can be successful, so you're able to fail forward. And guys, that's the biggest part of the attitude. I hope you realize that when you start talking about attitude as a difference maker, it truly can be. I would tell you right now that whenever people come to me about soldiers or players or cadets in my JROTC job, quite often the first question that they have for me is talk to me about the person. Talk to me about their attitude. How are they as a team player? Because the reality is nobody wants a negative attitude in their group. Nobody wants that person that comes to school, that comes to work, that comes to play the game, that just brings everybody else down, sometimes regardless of the skill sets that that person may have. They just don't want it. So now here's your assignment for this week. I want you on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, I want you to rate your attitude. I want you to send me a text that says on a scale of 1 to 10, I rate my attitude as this number. And in all honesty, here's how I see myself. So on a scale of 10, of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, how do you rate yourself? And tell me a little bit about your attitude. It don't have to be a paragraph. It could be a sentence or two, but tell me about how you see your attitude. Just send me a text. And then know this. Next week, next Saturday, we're going to be at the paintball complex. It is behind Paul Eames. So that baseball facility in Albany, it's right behind Paul Eames. I'll send you the address. I want you to know now, everybody's going to have to pay for their own way at the paintball. They charge us. It's going to be $50 per person. But just know this, the intent next week when we do this will be to do all of the paintball sessions. So we'll do 30 to 45 minutes of paintball, and then I'll wicker in between the sessions 10 to 15 minutes of leadership so that we can actually weave it into the paintball. So just come prepared to play paintball from 10 to 2 all day. That'll be the bulk of our day will be playing paintball and assessing how we can do some of the leadership perspective things in the middle of it. But just know you're going to be expected to pay for your paintball. That's purely money that's going to the paintball facility. That's not us. That's the equipment that they have, the paintball that you're going to be using, the paint, etc. So all of that will go straight to the gentleman that runs the paintball facility. Hope you guys have a great week. Hope you're able to apply this. And I tell you this, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you have the ability to change. If you don't like where your attitude is at right now, you have the ability to change it. Take and think about the things we discussed today, and think about where you are right now on a scale of 1 to 10, and think about how you can improve in that area so that when people look out at you, they say, that's the young man that I want in my organization. That's the player that I want on my team. I'm not sure about the skill sets. I can work with the skill sets, but that's the attitude, that's the mentality, that's the approach that I want in life. When I look at that young man, he's the kind of person we want to build our organization around. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great one. It's Coach Lassiter. Bye.